Good morning, everyone. It occurred to me this morning in my prayer and meditation time that I needed to take a minute to explain something because I keep talking about formulating our version of reality and how that happens. And I mentioned something the other day about being free or not free egoically. And then it occurred to me that I needed to take a second to explain what I'm talking about. So, about 15 years ago, it was more like 12 years ago, I was embarking on a journey of trying to learn how to function better as a human being. I ended up going into a training, NLP Marin, down in San Rafael. And one of the primary tenets of that training was helping us understand how we formulate reality, how human beings formulate reality. And one of the fundamental principles in that teaching is that effectively the stories that we tell ourselves about our life become our identity. So we've got these like core level identity beliefs that formulate who we think we are. And coming from a background where there was some degrading remarks. I was in a lot of trouble when I was a youth. So I was often being told by authority figures that, I wasn't going to amount to anything, or I wasn't good enough. And the core message that I received was that I wasn't good enough. And there came a point in the trajectory of my learning and growing that I started noticing this internal dialogue that was constantly berating me and reinforcing this idea that I wasn't good enough. And it was formulating how I was experiencing life. I could be excelling in some area and still have this narrative in behind the scenes that what I was doing was, for one reason or another, it wasn't good enough. And so I started noticing this self-critical inner voice, and how shameful it was, or shaming it was. And eventually I started questioning this thing, and it started with noticing that it was happening. It eventually, after a year or two, evolved into recognizing that it was happening and questioning whether it was valid or not. And then eventually it evolved into realizing that it was in fact not true, and countering it with truth. And eventually this thing lost its grip on me, and I started forming a new internal narrative that was based on things that are true. And the point that I'm trying to make is that I was experiencing life fundamentally based on what other people had fed into my subconscious, my psyche. It was my identity. I believed it was true about me. I couldn't tell the difference. I couldn't see the forest for the trees. I believed that I was somehow flawed and unworthy, or not good enough. So, the process of coming to realize that that wasn't true and breaking free of it took some time and some practice. What I'm wanting to share with you as it relates to that is that this identity belief structure system that we all carry around, it's often been called id or ego in various circles, and you've probably heard the term ego death at some point. And I have to not take for granted that I've had this experience of ego death numerous times in my life, because I can kind of like stand on the pathway of ego death, or so quote unquote ego death, and say, "Come on down this way, guys. It's great down here. There's freedom down this path." But I forget, in the process of coming to that place, it feels like death. I was told that the primary objective of the ego is to maintain itself. And so when people don't understand that that's what they're facing when they have to question these fundamental beliefs about themselves, it's too scary, it's too uncomfortable, it's too destabilizing. Like, it's very destabilizing to go to face these core beliefs about ourselves, question them, and reformulate them into something more useful. And I think that's fundamentally the point I'm wanting to share with you guys, is that those beliefs about yourself that you hold so closely without even knowing it most of the time are in fact a set of beliefs that were inserted there by yourself, by others, by teachers, by society. They are not the fundamental truth. And that's the kicker in all of this, is that you accepted them as true. That's why you experience life the way that you do. And that brings up the question, the reality and the question that you created your experience of your life. In other words, somebody else who had the same exact life experiences that you did could come up with a completely different conclusion about who they were. That's why you have households where people experience the same abusive, traumatizing childhood. One of them becomes a fully functioning doctor that's completely successful, and another one becomes a junkie in the streets. And it wasn't because of what happened to them, it was because of the story that they told themselves about what happened to them. And that brings up the scary point. You made up the meaning about your life, and this is where everybody freaks out and goes like, oh my gosh, if this is true, then all this pain that I caused myself and others along the way, it was my cause. Like, I caused that largely. Like, I'm not saying that the abuse that happened to you was your fault, but I am saying that the way that you took it on and responded to it is your responsibility. And that's ultimately what led me to searching when I realized that I was the author of my identity, and that it would probably behoove me to pick one that works well and produces outcomes that are useful in life. It sent me on a journey of inquiring what that may be, and that was where NLP fell short, because it basically said, what would you like your identity to be? And you create it based on your understanding, whatever you want, and you can create it to be whatever you want it to be. The problem with that is most people base it on the standards of the world, like wealth, self comfort, success, all the material standards of what our society tells you that your identity should be. Problem is all that stuff leaves you empty. For those of you that have pursued those things long enough to realize that they all leave you empty, knows that you could spend your entire life gaining the world and lose your soul, and it's useless. And the more useful question, in my opinion, and this is what I want to leave you with, and this is why I entered into the conversation about Christianity, because Christianity is an identity. To be a Christian is an identity. And the beauty of this belief structure is that it calls you a child of God. It says that you're forgiven and redeemed. It said that there's a destiny for your life that was chosen before the foundation of the earth, that you were set aside for purposes that are for God's will for your life and for the world, that you have been endowed with power, supernatural power to overcome evil in the world, that God has a plan for you to prosper you, to not harm you, that He's for you, that He's not against you. There's all these. That's just one of hundreds and hundreds of identity level belief structures that are held within Christianity, that are life-giving, that produce wealth that does not rust and cannot be destroyed by fire and cannot be stolen by thieves. It's real, true wealth. To understand that, that the things that are of the kingdom of heaven are of true value, and to apply them to your life and integrate them into who you are is the most useful belief structure level identity stuff that I've come across on this planet. That is why, in case you were wondering, I've become such a lover of Christ and the Bible and the things that are contained within it, because the identity that is formed within it and the gift of salvation and the indwelling power, that the revelation of the glorious riches of the power of the indwelling Spirit of Christ that raised Christ from the dead is living within me, guiding me, giving me wisdom and discernment. That's like the best thing ever that could possibly happen. Spending eternity in heaven. These are like, this is no small thing. That is why I've landed on Christianity. I'm trying to share with you guys, when you're looking at the news and it's freaking you out and all you see is death and destruction out there, you might consider what are your belief structures leading you to pursue in your absorption of media. How is that affecting your experience of life, your beliefs about yourself, about life, and about others? Is it life-giving, or is it slowly formulating a belief set and an inner dialogue and a view of yourself, of life, and others that is leading you to suffer? Then I suggest maybe shifting gears into what you're paying attention to, and pay attention to things that are uplifting, life-giving, and positive and wholesome and holy and good. Because if you do, it says in the Bible that the God of peace will surround you and indwell you, and you will experience the peace of God. This is may seem a little far out to some of you guys, but I'm just trying to share to you something that is fundamentally true. And Lord, I just ask that you would, for the people who need to hear this, that you would just gift them with revelation, so that they could, with the revelation of your divinity, the revelation of your spirit, your presence, God, that you would just fill the room where they're at now with your presence and reveal yourself to them in such a way that they could experience the joy that you promised us, not the joy as the world gives, but the joy as only knowing you can give. So that's my hope and my prayer for you. Thank you for listening. I'm sincerely trying to share something that's a little hard to grasp, and I hope that helps.